Hello and welcome to Movies and Tea. I'm your host always, Elwood, and joining me, of course, is my co-host Kim.
Hello.
And we are continuing on this episode our season-long re-evaluation of the filmography of Ang Lee. Tonight, continuing with his breakout into the studio system with 1995's Sense and Sensibility, a American period drama film. Adapted, of course, from the Jane Austen 1811 novel of the same name, when working from a screenplay from Emma Thompson, who here also stars as Eleanor Dashwood, who, along with her sister Eleanor, played by Kate Winslet, play a pair of sisters who are forced to seek financial security through marriage when their father passes away, and they are thrown into a rather destitute situation when the so-called promised inheritance is not delivered upon by their brother. Kim, I mean, obviously, tonight this film is a little different than what we looked at on our previous episode. We were obviously talking about the Father Knows Best trilogy, a combination of both Chinese and English language dialogue, and certainly a rather interesting trilogy of films. Obviously, as you rightfully pointed out, they ultimately culminate in the fact that Father perhaps does not know best. And now we're here on sort of more traditional fare with obviously an Austen adaptation. I mean, when it came to the film, Ang Lee never read the book, and it was only actually read it once. He had been sent the script by Thompson, and at this point she'd spent 5 years working on the script, and it was very up in the air whether she was going to actually star in the film or not, as there was other actors that they wanted to bring in to play the role of Eleanor, but she did obviously ultimately take on the role, and this was obviously a first screenplay as well, so it's a real challenge all around, really. I mean, we've got Ang Lee coming in off the independent circuit, obviously with his trilogy films, his first real English language film, and he's here tackling Austen. He's working with a first time scriptwriter, so it's kind of surprised that this would be the film that ushered in this whole slew of Austen adaptations when it became this huge success when it was released back in '95. But I mean, Kim, I'm right in saying you're like an Austen fan already. Is that correct?
Yeah. I like Jane Austen a lot. I've read most of her books except for one, which I'm having a hard time getting through. But
okay.
But Sense and Sensibility is not one of my favorites. It's not my favorite. It's just, it has its, I don't know, tougher moments to get through, I guess. It's for kind of the more, I guess it's, I find Austen stories are in age groups, So Pride and Prejudice is in that kind of age group, whereas Sense and Sensibility is kind of like a little bit older. You'd probably appreciate it a little more because of just where the girls are at, at the stage where, Marianne and Eleanor need to find their suitors, and especially this is a story more about Eleanor Dashwood, which is, Emma Thompson's character, who is, seems to be more urgently needing to seek a husband because she's, getting older as well.
Yeah.
She's the eldest sister. So, it's kind of a different thing. So yeah, for sure, Austen adaptation works in the sense where, I was reading up on, Ang Lee's, why he got hired for it, in the sense that it seems that he didn't really quite understand why he got hired either until, he realized that, partway through that, Austen was something that he might have not known before, but he really gets the kind of sense of humor that Austen has in just how they mesh the whole social satire and family drama.
Certainly so. I mean, Austen is, I perhaps rate slightly just below Bronte in terms of when we obviously talk about the classics. I mean, I read them years ago when I used to spend summers over in my grandmother's, and finding lack of reading material, worked my way through many of the classics just for something to read. And Yeah, at the same time, I mean, Austen has obviously got that built-in appeal for especially for British audiences, where all we seem to churn out over here is these costume dramas. It seems to be our main sort of bread and butter when it comes to film production. And while Sense and Sensibility, I think, is like just below Pride and Prejudice, which is the one that everyone sort of goes to when they think of like the Austen adaptations, I think the appeal of Colin. I would say Colin Farrell? No, I don't think it's right.
No, Hugh Grant.
No, it wasn't Hugh Grant. It was the guy who was in Kingsman. Okay.
Colin Firth?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the appeal of Colin Firth in a pond seems to outweigh the appeal of the story we're told here with these two sisters obviously trying to find suitable matches, which obviously amongst the suitors here we've got Hugh Grant giving a very good impression of a tree, as well as Alan Rickman, who seems rather lost in this production. He seems like a rather unsuitable suitor because of his advanced age compared to the other members of the cast. It seems like a rather awkward match there. But
well, I mean, I wouldn't, just to, I wouldn't say that. I would say that Alan Rickman's character, I think that in terms of characterization, most of them are done pretty well. I think the really in-your-face thing, especially if you know Austen really well, it would be kind of like that Willoughby character, which was played by Greg Wise. It's kind of like, most of the men fit in the description, especially because Alan Rickman's character is Colonel Brandon, and he's supposed to be a more older man, and, kind of like not quite the man that Marianne is looking for, but who is just, crazy about her.
Definitely so, and again, the problem I have with these period dramas is because obviously being a Brit, I mean, we're surrounded by this stuff. I mean, it's the sort of history that we're surrounded with, so, compared to like in American audiences, or perhaps in your case, Kim, the Canadian audiences, where you haven't got like rain-swept moors and stately manners to constantly be in your sort of face. It holds more of an exotic appeal, the same way that like the American crime dramas do for myself, and that's why it doesn't provide the same sort of escapism and the idea of running around moors and bodices and pretty bonnets that I know that the fans of this material certainly appreciate, and was perhaps kind of lost on myself. I mean, the filming itself, I mean, it's not Lee doing anything particularly fancy at this point. I mean, as I said, it is still his first jaunt into the studio system. Here we're working with his largest budget to date, with 16 million.
And I mean, I don't know if at that time, I can't remember if at that time many of these actors or this just cast has been very famous either. I mean, maybe Emma Thompson was a bit more famous, but Kate Winslet hasn't even had her big break from Titanic yet, and I don't know what Hugh Grant was doing at that time. Or Alan Rickman. Probably, I don't know, was that before Die Hard? I don't know. I can't remember.
It was after Die Hard, because
so
before
Alan Rickman was more, then he would have had more rapport than the other, probably him and Emma Thompson has a bit more pull than, say, Kate Winslet at that point.
Yeah, certainly Kate Winslet. I mean, she was already an established actress. She'd done television work as well as some film work, but you're right in saying that she wasn't pushed to the forefront. She hadn't received her A-list status that obviously Titanic provided her with.
Yeah.
Alan Rickman, I mean, he was already an established actor. I mean, Die Hard, he was like his first move into actually doing film. Before then, he was doing theatre work, which is always an interesting thing. You go out to see a play and you think, oh, there's the guy I want to play this charismatic terrorist in my film. But I mean, a lot of the cast, I mean, they're very familiar to British audiences because they're sort of like a lot of main sort of stays, and people that we've sort of seen on like through like many TV productions, which is obviously why when I think of Emma Thompson, it's where I think of her sort of like TV work, and then sort of like lesser so the film sort of work. I mean, here, I mean, we get the pairing of Alan Rickman and Emma Thompson, something that would get repeated like years later with Love Actually, where the two actually got coupled up together. So, but I mean, Emma Thompson, I mean, it's
well, 3/4 of his cast was in Love Actually, so
I know this is the problem with British casting. We tend to recycle a lot of the same actors. It's sort of like, oh, you're British and popular, let's cram you in this film. And it's so funny when you see like Hugh Laurie in this film, who I think if I'm going to be anyone in this film, I would probably be him, just the guy trying to read the paper and not be involved in all this nonsense that's going on.
He was by far the most amusing character ever. He had we had a whole discussion about this where it was like he had like 3 lines, but every time he would just nail it on the head with just how much he was kind of like the picture of what would happen if you married for money.
Yes, indeed.
And just, the long-term torment it would cause.
Certainly with Hugh Grant, I mean, a year earlier he does 4 Weddings and a Funeral, which really gives him the sort of push into it. And it's kind of surprising when you think of him having that star status from that film, and then here he's sort of more of a supporting role. It's a very small role that he has here. And certainly when you see him appear on screen, if you're not familiar with the subject material, you would think, oh, well, he's going to be in it for a decent chunk of the film. He's not just going to appear and then be cast off to London and then suddenly make a grand reappearance at the end of the film because we need to wrap this up.
Yeah, but I think that, I think it's a different thing, because I think that while I think Sense and Sensibility, I was reading about how it was trying to appeal to both Austen aficionados and the younger audience, kind of, that can be introduced to this material without having known the reading material before. It's really about these stories have never been about the men. Austen books are very female centric. They're stories about the girls. And I think that that's why, no matter whether you look at, Pride and Prejudice or you compare it to this one, your main male leads are never there throughout. They will, be named, or they'll be talked about, and they'll be introduced at the beginning. They might make a brief appearance in the middle, and then, they'll pop back at the end for the wrap up. But, they're never, constantly there.
Definitely so. And, I mean, how do we feel about the portrayal of the 2 sisters here? Because obviously the 2 sisters are very sort of key to this story, and it's a recurring sort of theme within sort of Austen work, really. I mean, the fact that you always have, like you said already, you have strong female role, but sisters in particular are a recurring theme. I mean, we have this in Sense and Sensibility, and you have it in, obviously, in this you have it in Pride and Prejudice as well. Makes it very, if you're not a big Austen fan, it's very hard to distinguish between them and just feel that, wow, she was really just recycling a lot of the plots, really.
Well, not exactly. I mean, every single one has a different scenario, and whether you talk about, if you talk about something like, in later, another work would be kind of like Mansfield Park, which I don't know was ever adapted, but Mansfield Park was, might have siblings, but it was more of one person, there wasn't really a strong sibling connection in that one. It's really Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice that really has that kind of comparison, I think. But I mean, talking about Sense and Sensibility, I think the sisters are done really well in the sense that, obviously, unlike Pride and Prejudice, which is about Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility is about finding that balance of the 2 sisters in their different views of both love and how much, how outwardly you control those romantic sensibilities, as they call it, right? And so to Marianne, how controlled Eleanor is to her feelings is very, it makes her feel like she's not portraying those feelings to make people, say for Edward Ferrars to understand how she's actually feeling towards him. And that's why, they always say that, he left because he didn't feel, the emotions that she did. Whereas, Marianne's feelings of being very, very just, let it all out, and I'm not going to hide my feelings, and just, that sort of thing is also very unaccepted in the society, and something that while, Eleanor does understand, she doesn't approve of it because, Marianne is kind of like single-handedly ruining her own reputation because the society means, like, how the society views you is so important back in that time period.
I mean, we obviously say that, but at the same time, when we look at the character paths, I mean, Marianne seems to have certainly a better time of things than her sister does. She has a number of suitors, including, obviously, the dashing John Willoughby, who, in typical costume drama thing, encounters her while she's off walking in the moors and twists her ankle, which is just a wonderful recurring
in a rainstorm.
I know, it's just it's this sort of nonsense that I'm sure that it's just charming, like the costume drama fans, but to myself I'm thinking, really, this again? It's like nobody wants to walk in the moors in the rain. It sucks.
Apparently she does. Austen characters love to walk in crap weather. I can tell you that much.
They do.
Always love to walk in crap weather.
It seems to be like a recurring thing. As soon as there's like a slightest sign of bad weather, you've got someone either running away or going for a walk in the bad weather. And as I say, it's always on the moor, which, being someone who like grew up walking on the moors, I can tell you it's not as exciting as I'm sure Austen would like you to believe that they are. It's just, basically farmland and sheep, and
well,
that's
about
what makes
their character unique, right? So
yeah, obviously
peculiar and unique is what these ladies are.
But I love the fact she's out in the middle of nowhere and he just happens to be riding his horse by, which is just so, and I mean, I think this is something I like about Thompson's script. Again, if you're not familiar with the material, you get to enjoy all these little moments where he's obviously introduced and he's all dashing, and you think, oh wow, this is going to be the Mr. Darcy of the piece. But no, of course, he's an absolute cad as he goes off and marries another woman for money.
I don't know. I don't, for people who know, obviously for people who know Austen writing, Willoughby is going to be the crap person, because just like, Pride and Prejudice had that other soldier guy that I forgot his name of, Mr. Wickham, who's that kind of charming man who comes in and he's kind of like, your perfect guy, where he's charming and he's handsome and he like just knows you really well, and he's not kind of like the more awkward sort of person, which I think in that sense Hugh Grant as in the sense of comparison to Willoughby and whatnot, or obviously in the sense Willoughby is the comparison to is against the character of Alan Rickman's Colonel Brandon, right?
Yes.
So you have this really huge contrast where it's a lot of it's a lot of comparison and a lot of contrast between what is your expectations and what is your reality of things, right? You can have this dream kind of man who you can fall in love with, have a great time, but in the end, the person who's going to be more true to you in the end, would that be kind of more the type of person who is like Colonel Brandon, who takes really good care of her? And while he's kind of more of a sensible person in that sense, bringing in the sense, like a more sensible type of person, and it's less of, that romantic sensibility, excitement deal. You have, Colonel Brandon in the end is the man who really is with her through all of this crap that she goes through, and all her bad decisions and all that sort of stuff that, all the hardships. So I think that in the terms of the script and in terms of character design and how it's all really portrayed, like, all this comes together and reflects that that Austen kind of, the Austen kind of story that's trying to be told here of, just in that sense of, how you portray love and how do you, your men and that's in their life and just how these two ladies, they view this whole situation, especially, you know, as you know, you see that Eleanor is obviously the much more responsible type of person. So she sees through all this, and you know, it's you know, it's a complex situation of just how people are carried away by appearances of you know, the superficial side of things, and they don't really notice those deeper elements of other characters, and all these characters kind of have that kind of, I guess, depth to them, where, you know, Willoughby has, you know, he goes away and we realize that, you know, he's gonna turn into, he's taking kind of like the path of the Hugh Laurie character.
It's
and you know, and you know, like, obviously they have kind of like those, you know, a lot of the movie really is a very typical period drama adaptation. Obviously, you know, you have beautiful music and you have that sort of stuff, and you also have, you know, those smoke and mirrors kind of ending where you think this happened, but oh no, this didn't happen. What? You misunderstood that situation. You left out that, you know, what went through the mill, you know, like, kind of the rumor mill came out all wrong. You were missing, like, this piece of information.
I think this again is where Thompson's script really comes into sort of play, really, and the fact that because it is a visual medium, it means you can play up elements of the novel and you can change things and make little changes, such as the fact that the sisters are shown living a much more opulent lifestyle before they're basically thrown out on the rear, because their brother's wife has decided that initially, because in the opening he's like, oh, I will give them, I think it's like £5,000, and over the course of the scene it like basically drops down to 500 that they're going to get, so they're basically left destitute, and he's still living this rich and fabulous lifestyle, and the fact that he can say it with such a straight face. And I kind of loved the fact that the comedic element of the banter between the two sisters is really sort of played up in the opening, and it's a shame that it wasn't so strong for the rest of the film as is during the opening, where they talk about the fact that she wants the key to the silver cabinet, because she probably wants to count all the pieces to make sure they're not stealing anything. And at the same time, we've also got elements such as with Willoughby, where his dashingness is really played up. They lay it on so thick, to the point that when it comes to like Colonel Brandon, they really prop Colonel Brandon's character up a lot more than it felt that they did in the book, by just using him to highlight just what a cad Willoughby is. But yeah, Willoughby's there, and as you said, he's riding in the rain and reading sonnets and these usual this usual eye-rolling stuff that I'm sure that you fans of bodice ripping are really kind of excited to see. But as someone who so this is a real sort of relationship of how material is sort of taught compared to if you just pick up these books and read them yourself, because having done English Lit and had the tedious way that these novels are done in class, I can tell you it really takes a lot of the charm off them. So there's a lot of these elements that are really sort of don't perhaps hold the same sort of charm that they do to Austen fans. So I mean, I really liked how the character Willoughby was played. I mean, the fact he's like, it's almost like his Jekyll and Hyde style performance we get here with him, because he's obviously shown all charming and trying to obviously seduce Eleanor. And Marianne, sorry, he's trying to introduce Marianne, and I mean, she's so young and naive. I mean, it's sort of like a wink of a schoolboy to get her out of that dress. It doesn't really take much to charm her so much. So when they meet again in London, and he's, as I said, he's like he doesn't know who she is. He just completely blanks it. It's just it's really sort of well played up, and you appreciate the changes that Thompson makes, even though she sticks very close to the sort of like the source material. She does obviously take the opportunity to make these sort of changes and sort of, I don't want to say improve upon the material, but certainly make it work better as a visual medium than it does compared to a novel, because as you probably know, there's certain things you can do in a book that work that perhaps don't work on a film, and sort of vice versa.
Yeah, And like that, I think that's a really important thing to remember. I think whenever we do adaptations, which is why I'm always good with adaptations making the necessary changes to make it on screen be more, because when you're reading, you have these descriptions, these long overdone, these really descriptive paragraphs that really like kind of make a scene come alive. Where in a movie, you don't have that same kind of thing. Because you can visually see it. A lot of things are hidden away, as in like, how someone is feeling or how someone is reacting to something. And all that relies heavily on, a lot of things that have to be shown on screen. And it's one of those things where I think that, Willoughby's character, while, I'm not, I guess because I'm an Austen fan and I kind of know kind of like where this character is going already. I wasn't really like, super seduced by this character either.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed like Thompson's way of just the way that she wrote the script, where there are certain lines, especially one where he comments about Colonel Brandon being kind of like, kind of just being like that competent man, but no one remembers talking to him. I think something like that, like paraphrasing. I don't remember that line exactly. And in the end, you see is that really, really great ending where when Marianne gets better when she gets better from her mega flu or something like that, she like wakes up, and as she's addressing everybody in the room for the first time, she notices, Colonel Brandon in the hallway, and she thanks him. And that's kind of like a progression of script, which gives this character so much more, because we, as, the audience watching this, the movie is scripted in a way where, Colonel Brandon is this character who appears throughout, but yet he does all these little things behind the scenes, which, obviously Marianne doesn't appreciate because of the fact that, he doesn't talk about it. He doesn't ask for, approval or ask for, just appreciation. So, it's a very big contrast in these two characters. And, Thompson's script is really good at really like making these characters have this subtlety to it. And I think that that's how they work really well with Ang Lee, because Ang Lee, as we saw with, Wedding Banquet and, Eat, Drink, Man, Woman and stuff like that, is a very subtle kind of director. He works with his scripts that are very subtle at executing things, and this is where the script and the direction really comes together.
Certainly so. And the scene where she's out in the rain, Winslet did actually catch Hypothermia shooting that sequence. Mm-hmm. It should also be noted that during the outside sequences, there was a particularly testing sequence involving a flock of sheep that made Ang Lee swear off working with animals again, something that he did actually break when it came to work doing Brokeback Mountain. And while we've been obviously talking about these characters, I've been trying to pace why the character Colonel Brandon really didn't work for me myself. I mean, obviously with the fact with Alan Rickman playing the role, and I think the problem is that because with Alan Rickman you get so familiar with him playing villainous roles. I mean, obviously mentioned Hans Gruber, he plays the Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and the fact is you're just waiting for that villainous term that never comes, and the fact that he's so emotionally unattached, and just seems like he doesn't seem to be like the most obvious sort of match for either sister.
But the thing is, isn't that what his character is, though? Because
I understand. I understand what his character is.
To me, I feel like that's what his character is supposed to be. He's supposed to be kind of like the opposite of what Marianne is. Marianne is looking for someone who's like her, who's really willing to, with without holding anything out, just expressing just outright their feelings. Whereas that's why Colonel Brandon is kind of like that person who isn't like that. And in the long run, it's something that, she sees as worth, being with than the fact that, seeing that difference. And it's that contrast, right? And I think that that's why, like, for me, Alan Rickman worked so well in this role. because he's a very subtle character also. He's a very quiet person, and he has those little, like, he's able to express himself through like his eyes or just through the body language and not through just his words.
Definitely so. And I think, again, this is just the point when you become so familiar with actors playing a certain type of role that you tend to sort of transfer it onto every role that they play, since it's sort of like that you're just waiting for that other shoe to drop. I mean, obviously his performance of the character is very sort of in keeping with the tone, but it's as I said, it's just he plays villains so well that it just sort of corrupts in my head. I'm just always constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop when it comes to his characters. So,
well, that's because you haven't watched I think Dark Harbor. He's not a bad guy, and then
he's not a bad guy in Love Actually. Well, he's having an affair, I guess, but
yeah,
so that
and then like in one of his later roles that I think I watched like a year or two ago was a Little Chaos, and he was a very mild character there because he played King Louis the 14 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know.
So yeah, it's, as I said, it's not. It's bizarre. I mean, obviously, when it comes to like the period dramas, I think that's because of coming up, surrounded by these sort of productions. And the British film productions being what they are, where we seem to just churn these things out, be it on TV or be it in cinema. It seems to be just the only thing we're able to make. Just long for a non-dramatic family drama. Just a fun little social satire, but it just never seems to happen for us Brits over here. So, and I think, and it's strange, obviously, and I think it's just this familiarity that just sort of makes me struggle to warm to the material more than obviously yourself, Kim. And when we obviously compare this to like the Asian costume dramas, and in particular, I think when we just keep him with Ang Lee, when we look at when we get to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I think we're going to be flipped. The roles are going to be reversed here, as I'll probably be the one gushing away, and you'll be the one going, "Yeah, it's okay. I've seen this all before. This is just old hat to myself." So that will be a fun one once we obviously get onto that one. So. But then again, since it's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was memorably described as Sense and Sensibility with swords, so.
Well, you know, I mean, the thing is, I think the next thing before we wrap this thing up is really talking about what Ang Lee did contribute to. Did Sense and Sensibility, in your opinion, did it change because Ang Lee was the director, or would it have made no difference who the director was? Because I feel like so far we've talked mostly about, you know, how Thompson's script really elevated this movie.
Yes.
But did as I think, you know, I think that when I was watching this movie, what became really obvious is what I think is that it didn't really matter who the director really was for this type of movie. But it was significant that we talked about it because it was his first entrance into the Hollywood system. You know, something that wasn't in his own language and wasn't, you know, and it was a much bigger budget than he had worked with before.
Definitely. So I think that Thompson is certainly the key element of this film. She's the real sort of backbone both in the fact terms that she takes on the lead, and she's also handling the scripted duties. What Lee brings to the film, though, is the cinematography and the visual style that the film has. While it's certainly not as inventive or as creative as his later films, we certainly see that same eye for detail, especially in the small minute details in terms of like costume and character interaction that we saw within The Wedding Banquet and Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. That when things are like kept on like a small scale, or when we've got like those grand sort of like the ballroom sequences, his cinematography really comes across in his eye for detail. Nothing ever feels muddled. Everything seems to have its place and its right sort of spacing and framing, and that's what he sort of brings to the film here. I mean, obviously it's his first film, it's his first studio film, He's still a new director, so I would feel that he wouldn't have the same sort of sway that he would obviously have with his later productions. And I think that certainly he was sort of basically drafted in because of the producers liking The Wedding Banquet so much and seeing that it sort of had the style that they were looking for with this film. But this was very much Thompson's production. The only thing, as I said, the only thing she's not really doing is just directing. But when you're scripting, especially something like Austin, you have the sort of control that a scriptwriter wouldn't have if like a sort of more mainstream project. I think as well the fact that this is the Austin like Bronte is so ingrained in British culture. The fact that coming in as like an American director, you kind of don't want to be messy, and you're working with a largely English cast, so you kind of want to feel that they know what they're doing already because this is what they've come up doing. Most of the cast have like come up through theatre background, and they play these sort of roles numerous times before, so you get the feeling that Lee's kind of like letting the actors just do what they know that they can do with these characters, and just basically focusing on the cinematography side of things more than the performance side of things.
Yeah.
I know certainly the Austin Society felt that Hugh Grant was too good looking to play Edward Ferrars. As they phoned to complain to Lee's producer James Chalmers to say that they should recast Hugh Grant's role.
Yeah, but I mean, in the end, the suitor is always supposed to be kind of a bit dashing, but I think Hugh Grant does try to really downplay himself a little into this more kind of like rigid character, as his character is supposed to be a little bit more kind of like awkward.
I understand what you're saying, and Hugh Laurie was actually going to play Colonel Brandon originally, before he was obviously relegated to the role of Mr. Palmer. I don't know if relegated is the right word.
I think they would have. I think if Hugh Laurie and Alan Rickman swapped roles, it would have still been really entertaining either way.
Alan Rickman reading the paper would have still been funny.
Exactly. The part where they're talking about we had a whole funny moment where they were talking about oh, is it that many miles away? The wife goes and he's like, it can't be, and then he's like, in the newspaper, try. It's like that was so entertaining.
I just love the fact when his paper gets creased.
And then he like reaches over to like smooth it out.
But again, this is where Hugh Laurie can do so much. Like Bill Murray, he can do so much with so little.
Yeah,
just a simple little look. And I don't think that Alan Rickman would have had a more exasperated sort of reaction to that, whereas Hugh Laurie plays it very simple. And I think that's the great thing. I mean, the man's acting behind a newspaper, for Christ's sake, and he's still one of the most engaging aspects of the film.
Exactly.
Well, with the script, Emma Thompson won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay, becoming the first person to win Oscars for both acting and writing. And both Thompson and Winslet did live together, which really helps with the sisterly bond, which you can see, and certainly that's one of my sort of key aspects of the film. I think definitely Thompson really sort of sells it as the older sister, even though it feels like there's a much more of an age gap between them. And Lee also spent 6 months living in England prior to filming to sort of acclimatise himself to the British sense of humour. So that probably explains why he does let them get on with things. Further viewing, if you like this one, I think this is probably the most easiest further viewing that we're going to have this season. So what would you recommend?
I think we already mentioned everything from your further viewing. So if you really want to watch the 3/4 of the main leads back together, then it would be Love Actually would be my further viewing. If you want something, quite in the same universe and kind of story, and Austen would be Pride and Prejudice.
Any particular
I always
one?
like to, and then I think one a little bit out of the left field, but kind of in that same family drama period, period costume drama sort of style, would be, I think that people don't talk about enough is it's like a TV drama, but I think it's only like 4 episodes, which is North and South. That one is one of my favorites. So I think that, it's a great time to mention it.
Okay. The one that I would throw out there as well would be Emma.
Yes.
With Gwyneth Paltrow. I feel that it's very much in the same sort of grouping of these films, as it came out shortly afterwards, and it's Gwyneth Paltrow convincing us that she can play a Brit, and also it convinced me that she can play a Brit. I say.
Just like how you feel about English lit having like broken this apart. I actually read Emma in a cinema and books course, so we had to like rip the script, the movie apart and the book apart and stuff like that. So I don't have quite the same charm about Emma when you get graded for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I think when it comes to English lit, it's very much on the teacher you have as to how you appreciate the source material, because there's so much of it that made me just not want to continue doing English lit. In particular, Alan Bennett is something that they love in English lit, and after being subjected to 4 weeks of a cream cracker under the settee, I just wanted to beat Alan Bennett up and down the block. It's sort of like when they had that Fight Club question of like, it's like, who would you fight live and dead? It's like Alan Bennett. I would kick the 7 shades out of that man for what he subjected me to. By God. And there's English lit fans there who just rave on about him, and it's sort of like, it's the same sort of crowd that also say like Stephen Fry's like this second coming of this scholar that you should all be following, and why they keep spamming my wall with that why Stephen Fry doesn't believe in God's video. It's like, just leave me alone, people. But no, Alan Bennett, the most overrated author, and his material is just used to torture school children, I'm sure. It's hideous stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you want a really unique take on the source material, you can also read Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters from Quirk Classics, which is part of the same category of books that also gave us Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, as well as Android Karina and the Meowomorphosis, which saw a salaryman turning into a cat. The Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters is probably better than Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, as they really sort of nailed down the formula, so it's sort of less cut and paste, and sees a world where is now inhabited with dangerous sea monsters. So we have the opening with the father dying of a hammerhead shark attack rather than his obviously more traditional death that we have in the film here, and it really sort of goes on from there, with the Colonel being a half man, half squid creation, and our Cad being a diver style creature who wears otter skin. So maybe that's what we'll discuss at some later point. I mean, that's brings us to the end of another episode of Movies and Tea. We hope you've enjoyed this jaunt through the period drama of Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility. And Kim, where are we going to next?
Oh, we're hopping forward 2 years into 97's The Ice Storm.
Yeah, Ice Storm, probably one of the most anticipated films for myself of this filmography, and a film that I keep wanting to see and I've just never got round to seeing. But certainly with Cameron Klein and Sigourney Weaver, as well as a early appearance by Elijah Wood as well, so certainly plenty to look forward to on that, and we'll be obviously talking about that on the next episode. If you haven't done already, please do hit the like and subscribe buttons, and maybe leave us a review. It really helps raise the profile of the show. You can also check out our blog, which is moviesandteapodcast.wordpress.com, which has our full archive of episodes, and you can also follow us on social media. We are on Facebook and Twitter, as well as Instagram as well, where we post not only announcements for our episodes, but also interesting bits and pieces relating to the directors as well. But thank you as always for listening, and we will be back next time talking about The Ice Storm. Good night.